Do you feel like your mind wanders without control? Buddhism offers ancient techniques to train the mind and achieve deep concentration. In this video, you'll discover how to develop mental discipline that will allow you to face daily challenges with serenity and clarity. If you're ready to master your mind and bring more clarity into your life, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more wisdom like this. Now, let's begin. The importance of mental discipline in Buddhism. At the heart of Buddhist teachings lies a clear idea. A disordered mind is a constant source of suffering. It's not just about scattered thoughts or lack of focus, it's about how an untrained mind becomes our worst enemy. That's why mental discipline isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Buddhism understands the mind as something that can be cultivated. Just as we train the body to be stronger or more agile, we can also train the mind to be clearer, more stable, more lucid. But this doesn't happen just because we want it to. It requires practice, consistency, and commitment. That's where discipline comes in. Many believe that having mental discipline means repressing what we feel or forcing ourselves to always think positively. But it's not about that. Mental discipline is knowing how to observe without reacting immediately. It's recognizing a thought and deciding whether to give it space or let it pass. It's directing our attention toward what matters without getting lost in useless distractions. When there's no discipline, the mind acts by inertia. It gets dragged along by any emotion, any memory, any impulse. Today, you want to do something. Tomorrow you don't. Today you're motivated. Tomorrow you sabotage yourself. Without clear direction, you go from one side to another without knowing why you do what you do, and that generates frustration, exhaustion, dissatisfaction. Mental discipline begins with something very simple: becoming aware, observing your mind, seeing how it works, detecting the patterns that repeat. It's not about judging yourself, but understanding yourself, because only what is seen can be transformed. This act of observing with attention is already the first step out of chaos. In Buddhist teachings, this type of training is cultivated through daily practice. It's not necessary to go to a monastery or isolate yourself from the world. Daily, life is already the perfect field for cultivating discipline. Every time you choose not to react with anger, every time you decide to finish what you started, every time you stay present despite discomfort, you're strengthening your mind. And it's not a matter of pure willpower, it's a matter of repetition. What you repeat becomes habit, and when discipline becomes habit, your mind no longer needs to be pushed. It directs itself toward what you've trained it for. It becomes firmer, more stable, more reliable. Mental discipline doesn't eliminate negative thoughts or prevent intense emotions from arising, but it gives you space between what you feel and what you do. And in that space lies your freedom, because you can choose. You can decide whether to follow a thought or release it, whether to respond from impulse or from clarity. That's why training the mind isn't an option. It's the foundation for any real change in life. A disciplined mind isn't rigid. It's free because it's not at the mercy of everything that appears, nor does it get lost in every stimulus. It's anchored, centered, awake. Techniques for calming the restless mind. The restless mind is like a monkey jumping from branch to branch without stopping. It goes from one thought to another, rushes to the future, gets stuck in the past, and rarely stays where it should be, in the present. This mental agitation is a source of anxiety, distraction, and fatigue. Calming the mind doesn't mean turning it off, but teaching it to focus, to rest, to be. One of the simplest and most effective techniques is paying attention to breathing. It's not about changing how you breathe, but observing how air enters and exits. By bringing attention to that natural rhythm, you begin to disconnect from mental noise. Every time the mind gets distracted, and it will, you bring it back without fighting. That repeated action, over and over, begins to create a more stable mind. Another tool is body scanning. Taking a few minutes to mentally go through your body from feet to head helps anchor you to the present. Noticing tensions, sensations, or simply contact with the ground reduces mental activity because it shifts focus from thoughts to sensations, and that generates an immediate state of calm. You can also use the conscious repetition method, choosing a word or brief phrase that evokes tranquility, like calm, release, here, and repeating it internally while breathing. It's not a mantra. It's a way of giving the mind a support point, something simple that counteracts the tendency toward disorder. You don't need to say it aloud or do it for hours. A couple of well-focused minutes are enough. Another resource is the intentional pause. Throughout the day, stopping for a few seconds between tasks. For example, before responding to a message, before entering a meeting, before speaking, just a few seconds to breathe and observe how your mind is. That micro-pause breaks the cycle of agitation and gives you space to respond with more clarity. Avoiding overstimulation is also key. Often our mind is restless because we give it too much unprocessed information, social media, notifications, pending conversations. Learning to limit those stimuli, even for moments, allows the mind to rest. You don't need to disconnect from the world, but you can choose what you pay attention to and when. Nature also has a calming power. Being outdoors, walking unhurriedly, listening to the wind, looking at the sky, these are actions that return the mind to its natural rhythm. You don't have to do anything special. Just allow the environment to remind you that not everything is urgency and noise. The most important thing is consistency. Calming the mind isn't a single act, it's a practice. Sometimes it works better, other times it's harder. The fundamental thing is not to judge yourself or demand immediate results. Just observe, breathe, release. Every time you do it, you're teaching your mind to rest. And when the mind calms down, you see with more clarity, not because problems disappear, but because you're no longer trapped in them. And that clarity is the starting point for living with more serenity. Developing concentration through practice. Concentration isn't a natural talent that only some have, it's a skill that's trained. In a world full of distractions, developing the ability to focus the mind is almost a superpower. And in Buddhism, this practice is essential for advancing on any path of personal transformation. Concentrating isn't just paying attention for a few seconds, it's maintaining attention continuously on a single object, thought, or activity without being carried away by what appears around. At first it's difficult because the mind isn't used to it. It's trained to jump, not to stay. But with practice, that permanence becomes possible. A classic and very powerful exercise is observing breathing, choosing a fixed point like the sensation of air in the nose or the movement of the abdomen, and keeping your attention there. Every time the mind gets distracted, you don't get angry or frustrated. You just bring it back. That repeated action is the muscle of concentration strengthening. Another effective technique is mindful attention in daily activities. Eating, walking, washing dishes. Any action can become a concentration practice if you give yourself completely to it. No multitasking, no doing something else at the same time. Just one action, one moment, one focused mind. This trains the capacity to remain, which then transfers to everything else. Using counting also helps at the beginning. For example, mentally counting from 1 to 10 with each breath. If you get distracted, you start over. It's not to punish yourself, it's to realize how easy it is to get lost and also how possible it is to return. Concentrating also involves learning to say no. No to unnecessary distractions, no to constant interruptions, no to the desire to do everything at the same time. Protecting spaces of silence, focus, and calm is a way of caring for your mind. It's not about becoming rigid, but having moments where you decide what deserves your attention and what doesn't. The environment also influences. An organized place, a stable posture, a defined routine help the mind concentrate better. But beyond the environment, the key is attitude. Not seeking quick results or demanding perfection from yourself, just practicing. Every time you sit, every time you try again, you're training something very valuable. And when concentration begins to develop, you notice it in everything. It costs you less to finish what you start, you understand better what you read, you listen more attentively to others, you make decisions with more clarity, because the mind, instead of being scattered, is present. And a present mind is more effective, more stable, more free. Cultivating concentration is giving yourself the gift of truly being where you are. And that, in a world that lives running, is a profound act of attention and respect toward yourself. Overcoming distractions and strengthening attention. Distractions are a natural part of daily life. It's not about eliminating them completely because they'll always appear, but learning to recognize them, reduce their power, and recover focus without losing calm. In Buddhism, this is trained like a muscle, not with pressure, but with consistency and presence. First, you have to understand what distracts us. Sometimes it's external things, noise, notifications, people, but often distractions come from within. Loose thoughts, unresolved emotions, anticipated worries. Knowing where they come from is the first step, so they don't drag us along. A practical way to strengthen attention is working in time blocks, choosing a single activity, setting a timer. It can be 10, 20, or 30 minutes, and committing to doing nothing else during that period. No interruptions, no checking your phone, no changing tasks, just focusing. At first it's difficult, but it improves quickly. When you finish, You take a break and then continue with another task. It's simple, but very powerful. Another strategy is keeping a record. During a day, write down how many times you lose attention, not to punish yourself, but to become aware. Sometimes we don't notice how scattered we are until we see it clearly. That awareness makes you gradually start to regain focus faster. It also helps to eliminate distractions before they appear, silencing notifications, organizing the workspace, planning the most important things of the day in the first moments, when the mind is freshest. You can't control everything, but you can reduce what you know takes you out of the present. And when you inevitably get distracted, because it will happen, the important thing is how you react. Instead of getting frustrated, simply return. Bring your attention back to what you were doing without judging yourself. Each return is part of the training. It doesn't matter how many times you get lost. What matters is how many times you come back. A good anchor to return to the present is the body, feeling contact with the chair, the air temperature, the movement when breathing. The body is always in the present, and using it as a reference point helps break the mental cycle of distraction. And remember, strengthening attention doesn't mean being focused all day without stopping. It means choosing where to put your energy. It means that when you're with someone, you're truly there. When you work, you do it without dispersion. When you rest, you do it without guilt. It's living more connected to what's happening now. Overcoming distractions isn't achieved with brute force, but with gentleness and repetition. Attention is like a flashlight. The more you train it, the more easily you can direct it where it really matters. The relationship between mental discipline and emotions. Many people believe that having mental discipline means repressing what you feel, avoiding emotions, or pretending everything is fine. But in reality, it's the opposite. True mental discipline gives you space to feel without getting lost in what you feel. It's what allows your emotions not to take control of your life. Emotions arise spontaneously. No one chooses to feel sad, frustrated, or annoyed. They appear as a response to what we experience. But what we can choose is what we do with that. That's where discipline comes in. When your mind is trained, you don't react with impulse, you react with awareness. For example, when anger appears, if there's no discipline, that emotion becomes harsh words, hasty decisions, or hurtful silence. But if you have a minimum of mental space, you can observe it before acting. You can recognize that you're angry without letting that anger take the reins, and that space makes all the difference. The same happens with fear, anxiety, or sadness. It's not about avoiding them or covering them with distractions. It's about feeling them without completely identifying with them, seeing that they're part of you but don't define you, that they pass, change, transform. That stability isn't achieved by chance, it's trained. A disciplined mind also allows you to distinguish between emotion and thought. Sometimes you feel anguish, and instead of staying with the sensation, your mind starts building stories. You invent futures that haven't happened. Remember old mistakes, punish yourself. But when there's trained attention, you can stop that chain. You realize you're just feeling something and don't need to turn it into mental drama. Also, with discipline, you can sustain pleasant emotions without losing balance. Joy, enthusiasm, gratitude also need stability, because if you let yourself be carried away by euphoria, then comes the crash. But if you're present, you can enjoy those emotions without exaggerating or getting attached to them. The relationship between mind and emotions is very close. What you think feeds what you feel, and what you feel influences what you think. That's why if you train your mind, you start to positively influence both directions. It's not magic, it's practice. And over time, you discover that you don't need to flee from your emotions or let them dominate you. You can be with them, listen to them, understand what they want to tell you, and move forward without losing your center. That's the freedom that discipline gives. A mind that doesn't deny what it feels but also doesn't get dragged along by it. Incorporating mental discipline into daily activities. Mental discipline isn't trained only in special moments or limited to meditation. It's cultivated above all in what you do every day, when you walk, talk, eat, work, shower, or even when you wait in line. Every moment is an opportunity to strengthen the mind if you decide to be present. One of the most effective habits is doing one thing at a time. It seems simple, but in practice, it's difficult. We get used to doing many things simultaneously. Eating while checking our phone, talking while writing, walking while responding to messages. This habit fragments attention, but when you choose to focus only on what you're doing, you're training your mind to remain. When eating, for example, you can pay attention to flavor, texture, the movement of chewing. You don't need to turn it into a slow ceremony or anything special. Just be present. When walking, feel the contact of your feet with the ground. If you're in a conversation, listen without thinking about what you're going to say next. You're practicing concentration without leaving your routine. Another way to apply mental discipline is establishing simple but consistent routines, not out of rigidity, but to create structure. For example, deciding on an hour to start the day without screens, taking a few minutes to breathe before starting important tasks, or closing the day with a moment of silence. Repetition creates a base that stabilizes the mind. It's also useful to have visual reminders or brief phrases that anchor you, a word written on paper, an image on your screen background, a gentle alarm that sounds at a certain time to invite you to stop. It's not about saturating your environment with messages, but using small anchors that remind you, return, breathe, observe. Even moments of discomfort are ideal for training discipline. When you're stuck in traffic, waiting for a response, feeling impatience, instead of letting yourself be carried away, observe. Ask yourself what you feel, what thoughts appear, how your body behaves. That conscious pause gives you power over automatic reaction. And when you make mistakes, because you're going to forget, get distracted, or lose focus, discipline is trained by returning. Without guilt, without demands, just return. That simple action, repeated many times, is what changes the quality of your mind. Bringing mental discipline to daily life isn't about doing more things. It's about doing the same things with more awareness. It's turning each action into an opportunity to choose to center yourself. And when that becomes habit, you no longer need special conditions to be focused. Your daily life becomes your practice field. Benefits of a trained mind in decision-making. Making decisions is one of the most frequent and important activities of our life, from the simplest ones, like what to eat, to the most complex, like changing jobs or ending a relationship. We're constantly choosing. But a scattered, agitated mind dominated by impulse tends to decide from fear, haste, or confusion. In contrast, a trained mind makes decisions with clarity, stability, and vision. When you have mental discipline, you don't react to the first thing that appears. You give yourself space to think, to observe what you feel, to listen to what you need. That doesn't mean you always choose correctly, but you do choose with more awareness, and that greatly reduces regret and chronic indecision. A trained mind also distinguishes between desire and need. Often we make decisions just to avoid momentary discomfort. We buy something to feel better, avoid a difficult conversation to not feel uncomfortable, say whatever to get approval. But a clear mind sees beyond impulse. It asks what is really useful, what makes sense long-term, what responds to who we are and not just what we feel in the moment. Another advantage is that you learn to release obsession with the result. You decide with attention, but without clinging to everything turning out perfect. You know you did the best possible with the information and clarity you had at that moment, and that's enough. It frees you from constant fear of making mistakes, because you trust your process, not just the result. Additionally, a disciplined mind doesn't get dragged along by external pressure. Instead of acting from fear of judgment or following the crowd, you can stop and ask yourself, is this coherent with me? Am I doing this from real commitment or from impulse? That pause between stimulus and action is what transforms an automatic decision into a conscious choice. There's also more emotional stability when making difficult decisions. When you have to close a cycle, set boundaries, or take risks, the trained mind doesn't waver. It can feel fear, yes, but doesn't act from it. It acts from a deeper, more serene place, and that gives a strength that's not seen from outside but is felt from within. And perhaps most importantly, you learn to decide without so much anguish. You no longer live paralyzed by all the options or depend on others' validation to act. You listen to yourself, evaluate, choose, and if you later need to correct course, you do it without punishing yourself, because you know that deciding isn't always about being right. It's about moving forward. Decision-making becomes simpler when the mind is centered because it's no longer full of noise, distractions, mental stories that take you away from what really matters. A trained mind doesn't guarantee success in every decision, but it does ensure that each step you take is from yourself, not from chaos. Thank you for joining us here. If this content has been useful to you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Here we continue sharing tools to cultivate a stronger and more serene mind. And if you have any experience or reflection you want to share, leave it in the comments. Your participation enriches this community. With gratitude, Daily Dharma.